Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been running this small trailer shop for 30 years now. My best friend owns the business, but he's got two other companies to worry about, so I pretty much handle everything here. We specialize in high-end work, custom luxury travel trailers that cost more than most people's houses. With that territory comes entitled customers. But after 3 decades, I thought I'd seen it all. The shop sits right on the main highway between two major cities. We're not a sales lot. We're appointment only for repairs and custom builds. That's why we keep the gate locked at all times. Too many tourists stop by thinking they can browse around and waste our time when they have no intention of buying anything. Last year, right when everything started shutting down because of the virus, I was moving a trailer that had just been dropped off for repairs. I had to open the gate to get it positioned properly in the lot. When I was walking back to close and lock the gate, this pickup truck comes barreling into the lot, pulling the biggest fifth-wheel toy hauler I'd ever seen. This thing was massive, easily worth over $200,000. It had everything you could imagine. Two flat-screen televisions inside, another one that slides out from an exterior compartment, full outdoor kitchen, the works. This wasn't some weekend warriors setup, this was serious money. I walked over to the driver and told him that he needed to back out so I could close the gate. I explained that only employees were allowed to drive in the lot. The guy jumps out of his truck like I'd just insulted his mother. He started yelling that he had an appointment to put his trailer in storage here. I told him we don't do storage and that I didn't have any more appointments that day since we were closing for the weekend. He got even more angry and shouted that I didn't know what I was talking about. He claimed he was best friends with the owner and had been told he could drop his trailer any time he wanted to. He starts unhooking the trailer right there in the middle of our work area while I'm standing there telling him we don't do storage for anyone. I explained that he must have us confused with somewhere else because we absolutely do not store trailers. The guy kept working on unhooking his trailer, cursing at me the whole time. He insisted that the owner was his best friend and that he'd been told he could do whatever he wanted here. I kept trying to explain that we do not store trailers for anyone, including friends of the owner, but he wouldn't listen. That's when he really lost it. He threw his business card at me along with the keys to the trailer and jumped back in his pickup. He yelled at me to deal with it myself and peeled out of there so fast his tires were throwing gravel everywhere. 3 windows on a nearby trailer got broken from the rocks he kicked up. I just stood there holding his keys and business card, looking at this $250,000 trailer he'd just abandoned in my lot. I moved his trailer to the back of the lot and filled out a mechanic's lien that same day. I included the cost of replacing those 3 broken windows and the amount owed. The next day I mailed off all the required legal paperwork to the address on his business card. I figured he'd show up the following week, probably embarrassed about his tantrum. I was ready to release the trailer to him once he paid for the window damage, but days turned into weeks and I heard nothing. I sent notice after notice to his address, certified mail, regular mail, everything I could think of. After 30 days, the law says I can sell the trailer for whatever I can get. But I waited. 2 months went by with no contact. Then 3 months. This guy had just walked away from a $200,000 trailer over some broken windows that would cost maybe $500 to fix. After 3 months, I decided to move forward with the sale. I got my friend who owns the business to sign all the required paperwork and filed everything with the proper authorities. The whole process has to be done by the book. There are strict laws about abandoned property. On my way home that day, I realized I could buy the trailer myself. It's legal since I don't own the business. I just manage it. I called my friend and told him I wanted to purchase the abandoned trailer. He asked me how much I wanted to pay for it. I asked him what was fair, and he said $50 to cover the paperwork costs. So I bought myself a $200,000 luxury trailer for $50. The next month, me and my 2 employees took a fantastic 4-day camping trip in it. That trailer had every comfort you could imagine. Full kitchen, bathroom with a shower, comfortable beds, entertainment system. It was like staying in a high-end hotel room on wheels. For over a year, I figured that was the end of it. Then last week, guess who shows up at the shop? The same guy who'd abandoned the trailer, acting like nothing had happened. He told me he was there to pick up his trailer. I told him that the trailer had been sold because he never responded to any of the notices we sent. He demanded to know what notices I was talking about and accused us of stealing his trailer. I explained that I had copies of every certified letter we sent to his address and that he never replied to a single one. That's when he lost his mind. He started screaming about how we were thieves and how he was going to have us all arrested. He called the police right there, demanding they arrest me for theft. When the officers arrived, I showed them everything: the mechanic's lien, the certified mail receipts, the legal notices, the sale paperwork. Everything had been done exactly according to state law. One officer looked everything over and told the guy that it appeared everything had been handled through legal channels. I told the officer that I'd even sell the trailer back to the guy for the $50 I paid for it, plus an apology for how he spoke to me when he dumped it here. The guy wasn't having any of it. He refused to apologize and kept calling us crooks. He started cursing at the police officers, calling them corrupt and accusing them of being in on some conspiracy. Then he made the mistake of taking a swing at one of the officers. That did not end well for him at all. Turns out this guy had a warrant out for his arrest. While they were booking him, I found out from one of the officers that he'd embezzled a huge amount of money from his former employer and had been trying to flee the state. A few days later, I learned the full story. He'd stolen over $300,000 from the company where he worked and was planning to disappear. If he'd just listened when I told him we don't do storage, he probably would have gotten away clean. Instead, his arrogance and entitlement landed him in jail, awaiting trial. Meanwhile, I'm taking my $50 luxury trailer camping again this weekend. I was born with this really thick, dirty, blonde hair that my parents never wanted to cut. My mom always said it was too beautiful to trim. And honestly, I loved having long hair too. When I was 6, it reached almost to my waist and people would always comment on how pretty it was. I got used to strangers asking if they could touch it, and I was usually okay with it when they asked nicely first. My mom and I had this routine where we'd go grocery shopping every Thursday after she got off work. She worked long hours at the bank, so these trips were kind of our special time together. I was a pretty independent kid for my age, so she'd sometimes send me to grab things from different aisles while she worked through her list. I knew that store like the back of my hand. This particular Thursday started out like any other. We walked into the grocery store and my mom grabbed a cart. She had her usual list written on the back of an envelope, and we went through the produce section first like always. She was picking out vegetables for dinner when she realized she forgot to write down bread. My mom asked me to run over to the bakery section and grab our usual whole wheat bread. I asked if I could look at the other bread too, and she said yes, but told me not to take too long because she wanted to get home before it got dark. I skipped over to the bread aisle, feeling pretty grown up that my mom trusted me to shop by myself. I found our regular bread easily, but then I saw they had fresh baguettes in the bakery section. I'd never tried a real baguette before, just the frozen ones we sometimes got. This one looked all crusty and golden, and I could smell how fresh it was. I stood there for probably 5 minutes, just staring at all the different types of bread. There were sourdough loaves, dinner rolls, and even some fancy-looking braided bread. I completely forgot that my mom was waiting for me on the other side of the store. I finally grabbed our usual bread and one of the baguettes, thinking maybe I could convince my mom to let us try something new for dinner. I was walking back towards where I left her, trying to balance both loaves in my arms, when suddenly I felt this sharp pain in my scalp. Someone had grabbed a huge chunk of my hair and yanked it so hard that my head snapped back. I dropped both loaves of bread and started crying immediately. It felt like someone was trying to rip my hair right out of my head. The pain was so intense that I couldn't even turn around to see who did it. I screamed for them to stop and let go, crying so loud that I heard my mom calling my name from across the store. But whoever had my hair wasn't letting go. They were actually pulling harder, like they were trying to drag me somewhere. That's when I heard this woman's voice behind me. She was talking about how beautiful my hair was and saying that her son just wanted to feel how soft it was. I managed to turn my head a little and saw this lady, probably around 40, with her hand twisted up in my hair. Next to her was a boy who looked about my age, and he was reaching out trying to touch my hair while his mom held me in place. I begged her to let go and told her it hurt really bad, but she just called me a baby and said that hair doesn't hurt. But it did hurt. She had such a tight grip that I could feel individual strands breaking. I kept crying and trying to pull away, but she was way stronger than me. That's when my mom came running around the corner. She took one look at what was happening. She yelled at the woman to let me go right now. Karen tried to defend herself by saying her child just wanted to touch my hair because it was very pretty and they thought I wouldn't mind. My mom was furious and told her she could have asked me first instead of just grabbing children and pulling their hair. I was still crying and begging for her to make the woman stop hurting me. My mom threatened to call the police if Karen didn't let go of me immediately. Karen finally loosened her grip, but she didn't seem sorry at all. In fact, she looked annoyed that my mom was making such a big deal about it. She accused my mom of harassing her and her child, saying all she did was let her son appreciate my beautiful hair, and there was nothing wrong with that. My mom told her she had physically grabbed her 6-year-old daughter without permission, and that was assault. Karen laughed and said assault was ridiculous, claiming she barely touched my hair, and I was just being dramatic. My mom pointed out that I was still crying because Karen had hurt me. I was still crying pretty hard. My scalp felt like it was on fire where she grabbed me, and I kept touching the spot to make sure I wasn't bleeding. Karen said if my mom wanted to make this into some big legal issue, she would call the police herself. She claimed the officers would see that my mom was the one causing problems. My mom told her to go ahead and call them, because she would love to explain to the officers how Karen had assaulted a child. Karen said she was calling them right now and that my mom would see who was really in the wrong. She pulled out her phone and actually called the police. While we waited for them to show up, she kept telling her son that he didn't do anything wrong and that some people are just mean for no reason. My mom stayed close to me and kept asking if I was okay. When the police officers arrived, they separated us and took statements from everyone. I heard Karen talking to one of the officers, and she was making it sound like I had given her permission to touch my hair and that my mom had attacked her for no reason. The officer asked Karen to tell him what happened. Karen lied and said that my son and she were shopping when I came up to them and asked if they wanted to touch my hair. She claimed I said lots of people asked to touch it because it's so pretty, so her son reached out to feel it. Then she said my mom came running over screaming at them and threatening to call the police for no reason. I wanted to tell the officer what really happened, but I was still pretty shaken up and scared. My mom did most of the talking for me. My mom told the officer that Karen's story wasn't what happened at all. She explained that I was walking back from the bread aisle when Karen grabbed my hair and pulled it so hard that I started crying. She said she heard me screaming from across the store. The officer asked if there was any way they could verify what actually happened. My mom suggested they check the security cameras because the whole area was covered by cameras. The store manager came over and said they could pull up the footage right away. We all went to the security office and watched the tape. It clearly showed me walking with the bread, then Karen grabbing my hair from behind and holding on while her son touched it. You could see me trying to pull away and crying. The officer looked at Karen after watching the footage and told her the video showed her grabbing my hair without permission. He also said she had given a full statement about what occurred. Karen protested that the video didn't show everything, and that wasn't what happened. But the officer said the video was pretty clear and arrested her for assault and for filing a false police report. Karen kept yelling that it was ridiculous and she was just letting her son touch my hair. She claimed people touch kids' hair all the time, but the officers weren't buying it. They handcuffed her and put her in the police car. Her son started crying and I actually felt bad for him even though his mom had hurt me. My mom decided to press charges because she said people needed to learn that you can't just grab other people's children. The whole legal process took a few months, but eventually Karen was sentenced to 6 months in jail for assault and got fined for lying to the police. The judge made a point of saying that children have the same right to personal space as adults, and that grabbing a child without permission is never acceptable, no matter what the reason is. I still have long hair, but now I'm much more careful about who I let touch it. And my mom always stays close when we're out in public, just in case there are any other Karens around who think they can just grab kids whenever they want. My family never thought we'd end up selling food on the side of the road. My dad worked construction for 15 years, pulling in steady money while my mom stayed home with me and my little sister. We weren't rich, but we got by just fine in our small house with a white picket fence and the mortgage that seemed manageable back then. Everything changed when Dad fell off a scaffold at work. The doctors said he had a disc protrusion in his spine. Basically, one of the discs had popped out of place and was pressing on his nerves. He couldn't lift anything heavy anymore, couldn't bend the way construction work demanded, and definitely couldn't climb ladders or scaffolding. Workers' compensation covered some medical bills, but it wasn't enough to replace his full salary. I was 13 when we started running out of money. I remember watching my parents whisper at the kitchen table late at night, surrounded by bills and bank statements. Mom had applied for jobs, but she hadn't worked in over a decade, and employers weren't exactly lining up to hire someone with that kind of gap in their resume. Dad tried to find office work, but his back pain made it hard to sit for long periods, and frankly, there weren't many desk jobs in our small town anyway. That's when Dad remembered something about his heritage. His mother had been born on the reservation in a town about 45 minutes away. He'd never really talked about it much, but technically he was part of the tribe, which meant we had the right to conduct business there. The reservation had a decent amount of foot traffic from tourists and locals, and Dad figured we could start small, maybe sell some homemade food from a cart or a booth. We scraped together what little money we had left and bought supplies. Mom was actually a pretty good cook, and she knew how to make large batches of tacos, burritos, and other simple Mexican food that would be easy to prepare and serve. We loaded up our 2012 Nissan, which we were still making payments on, with coolers, a small propane grill, and ingredients. The first few days were rough. People on the reservation were polite but cautious. We were clearly outsiders, and they weren't sure what to make of us. Most folks would walk by our little setup without stopping, maybe looking over but not buying anything. We were starting to wonder if this whole plan was going to work. Then we met her. She was an older woman, probably in her late 60s, with graying hair and a kind smile. She stopped by our booth on our third day and ordered 2 beef tacos and a soda. The woman mentioned that we were new around here. Dad told her we were just trying to make an honest living. She said the food smelled good and that she was willing to give us a try. She introduced herself and told us she lived just a few miles down the road. She seemed genuinely sweet, asking about our family and how we ended up selling food. When Dad explained about his back injury and our financial situation, she was sympathetic and encouraging. She told us not to worry and said that word gets around fast on the reservation. If our food was good, people would start coming. She was right. After she started coming by regularly and telling her friends about us, we began getting more customers. She became our first regular, stopping by almost every day for lunch. We were grateful for her business and her kindness during those early weeks when we were barely scraping by. We made sure to follow all the health regulations we knew about. We wore gloves when handling food, kept everything clean, and had a small hand washing station set up. It wasn't fancy, but it was sanitary and legal as far as we understood. About 3 weeks into our new venture, everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and we'd had a pretty good lunch rush. Several people had stopped by, including some new faces we hadn't seen before. Business was actually starting to pick up, and for the first time in months, my parents seemed optimistic about our financial situation. That's when she showed up again, but this time she wasn't smiling. She angrily demanded that we go home. Dad asked her what she meant and why we should leave. She accused us of stealing all her business. Dad looked confused and told her that we were in a competitive market. She shot back that we weren't even from here and pointed at our car as proof. Dad explained that we were doing this to keep our car and to keep the water running in our house. She yelled at us to go away because we didn't belong there. I had never seen someone's personality flip so completely. This woman, who had been sweet and encouraging just days before, was now standing there pointing at us like we were criminals. The way she was looking at us made my skin crawl. If looks could kill, I would have been dead on the spot. She walked back to her car and made a phone call. Dad wasn't intimidated, but he was clearly confused and hurt by her sudden change in attitude. We kept serving the few customers who came by, but the whole atmosphere had shifted. About 20 minutes later, a police car pulled up. The officer was polite but told us that someone had called in a complaint about us operating without proper permits and licenses. Apparently, selling food on the reservation required special documentation that we didn't have. We weren't in trouble, he said, but we would need to get the proper paperwork before we could continue. Dad was frustrated but not defeated. The officer gave us a website where we could take the required tests online and apply for the permits. It would cost some money we didn't really have, but it was better than giving up entirely. We went home that day with our tails between our legs, but Dad was determined. We spent the next 2 days studying for the tests and scraping together the money for the permits and licenses. All three of us, Mom, Dad, and me, took the online courses and passed. We even had the permits laminated and ready to display on our equipment. When we returned to the reservation a few days later, our former friend was waiting for us. She reminded us that she had told us to go away. Dad explained that we had left, but now we were back and she couldn't force us to leave because we had our permits and licenses. He pulled out the laminated documents and showed them to her. Then he mockingly asked if she had the same paperwork. The way he said it was definitely mocking, and I could tell he was enjoying turning the tables on her. She gave him a look that could have melted steel, then walked back to her car and left without another word. But we weren't done with her yet. Over the next few weeks, we started paying attention to her operation. Turns out she had her own little food stand set up about a block away. Something we hadn't really noticed before because we've been focused on our own business. And what we saw wasn't pretty. She was handling food without gloves, had no visible hand washing station, and her heating equipment looked questionable at best. We started taking pictures and videos whenever we saw violations. The worst part was watching her handle money and then immediately touch food without washing her hands or changing gloves. We submitted everything to the tribal health services. The receptionist who took our complaint seemed very interested in what we had to say. The receptionist told us that this woman had actually reported more people to them than anyone else in the past year. They did a background check and discovered that she didn't have any of the required licenses or permits that she'd gotten us in trouble for not having. A health inspector paid her a visit the following week. The inspector shut her down immediately. Her booth was deemed unfit for food handling, and she was fined heavily for operating without permits and for multiple health code violations. We didn't see her for several months after that. The next summer, I was 14 and getting pretty good at helping with the family business. We built up a decent customer base, and money was still tight but manageable. Dad offered me $10 to stand on the street corner with a sign advertising our booth. It was actually kind of fun. I'd spin the sign, dance around a bit, and people seemed to get a kick out of it. Some folks even took pictures and videos, which ended up being great advertising for us on social media. I was out there on a hot Arizona day, spinning my sign and trying to stay cool, when I heard a car slow down nearby. I looked over and saw a white Impala pull up to the curb. The window rolled down and there she was. She screamed racial slurs at me, calling me horrible names and telling me to go back to my hometown. Then she hit the gas and sped away, leaving me standing there in shock. I've been called names before. Kids at school could be cruel, but this was different. This was an adult. Someone who had pretended to be kind to my family, screaming racial slurs at a 14-year-old kid just trying to help his parents pay the bills. I walked back to our booth and told my parents what had happened. Dad's face went through about 5 different expressions before settling on cold anger. Dad said that was it, and we were calling the police. The officer who took my statement was thorough and professional. He asked me to repeat exactly what she'd said and to describe her car. When I mentioned it was a white Impala, he seemed to recognize the description. The officer told us they would pay her a visit and have a talk with her about the harassment. What happened next was better than anything we could have hoped for. Turns out our former friend had a warrant out for her arrest for something completely unrelated to us. When the police showed up at her door to discuss the harassment incident, they discovered the warrant and arrested her on the spot. She spent 2 weeks in jail. We found out later that she'd been reported multiple times for various issues around the reservation, harassment, filing false complaints, disturbing the peace. Our incident was apparently just the latest in a long line of problems she'd caused for people. I'm older now, and I still help my family with the food business when I can. We've built up a good reputation on the reservation, and people know they can count on us for quality food and honest service. Dad's back never fully healed, but he's found ways to manage the pain and keep working. I haven't seen her since that day she yelled at me from her car. Someone told us she moved away from the area not long after getting out of jail. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.